Ethan Cole stood in the middle of his small, cluttered apartment, staring at the pile of rejection letters on his coffee table. He had always imagined that life after graduation would be exciting and full of opportunities. Yet here he was months later, still unemployed and unsure of what to do next. His days had started to blend together, each one a monotonous cycle of job applications, interviews, and disappointments. Ethan was a charming and witty young man with a knack for making people laugh. He had always been the life of the party, the guy everyone wanted to be around. But lately, even his humor couldn't mask the frustration growing inside him. He needed a change, something different, something unusual. That's when he saw it. Scrolling through an online job board, Ethan's eyes caught on a peculiar listing. Looking for a creative thinker? Enjoy solving problems? Join the Alibi Agency, where we help people get out of sticky situations. No experience required. Ethan blinked, unsure if he had read it correctly. An alibi agency? It sounded like something out of a movie. Curious and in desperate need of a job, he clicked on the link. The description was vague but intriguing, emphasizing the need for creativity, quick thinking, and a strong moral compass. It was bizarre, but there was something about it that piqued his interest. After all, it wasn't like he had any other offers on the table. With a shrug and a slight smirk, Ethan decided to go for it. He submitted his resume and cover letter, expecting little in return. To his surprise, he received a response within an hour. The message was brief and to the point. Interview at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Address, 121 Maple Street. Come prepared. The next day, Ethan found himself standing in front of an unassuming brick building on Maple Street. The sign above the door simply read, "The Alibi Agency," in small, discreet letters. He hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open. Inside, the office was surprisingly modern and sleek, with minimalist furniture and a calming color palette. A young woman at the reception desk smiled at him and gestured towards a door at the end of the hallway. "Miss Harper is expecting you." Ethan walked down the hall, his heart pounding in his chest. He was nervous, but also excited. He had no idea what to expect. As he reached the door, he took a deep breath and knocked. "Come in," a voice called from inside. Ethan pushed the door open and stepped into the office. It was a spacious room with large windows that let in plenty of natural light. Behind a polished wooden desk sat Lena Harper, a woman in her mid-30s with sharp features and an air of confidence. She had dark hair pulled back into a neat ponytail and wore a tailored suit that spoke of professionalism and authority. "Ethan Cole?" she asked, glancing up from her computer. "Yes, that's me," Ethan replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Lena studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she was sizing him up. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. "You're hired." Ethan blinked, taken aback. "Wait, what? Just like that?" Lena leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "I've been doing this long enough to know when someone's right for the job. And you, Mr. Cole, have exactly what I'm looking for. Quick wit, creativity, and that look of someone who's ready for a challenge." Ethan was speechless. He had walked in expecting a rigorous interview process, not an immediate job offer. "But what exactly is it that you do here?" Lena's smile widened. "We help people, Ethan. People who find themselves in difficult situations, who need a way out. We provide them with excuses, alibis, and cover stories that are airtight. But it's not just about lying, it's about protecting people, preserving relationships, sometimes even saving lives. Our work requires discretion, intelligence, and a strong moral compass." Ethan nodded slowly, still trying to process everything. "And you think I can do that?" "I do," Lena said confidently. "But let me be clear. This isn't just about making up stories. You'll need to be resourceful, quick on your feet, and aware of the ethical lines we must never cross. We're not here to hurt anyone. We're here to help in the most unconventional way." Ethan considered her words carefully. The job was certainly unusual, but there was something about it that appealed to him. It was different, exciting, and full of possibilities. He could feel the thrill of the unknown tugging at him, urging him to take the leap. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, I'm in." Lena's eyes sparkled with approval. "Welcome to the Alibi Agency, Ethan. I think you'll find this job to be quite the adventure." As Ethan left the office that day, his mind was buzzing with anticipation. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The alibi agency was going to be unlike anything he had ever experienced, and he couldn't wait to dive in. The next chapter of his life had just begun, and it promised to be anything but ordinary. Ethan sat at his new desk in the alibi agency, trying to shake off the nervous energy that had been building inside him since he arrived that morning. The office was quiet, save for the occasional ringing of phones and the soft murmur of conversations from the other rooms. The minimalist decor and serene atmosphere were a stark contrast to the flurry of thoughts racing through his mind. Today was the day of his first assignment, and he wasn't entirely sure he was ready for it. His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of Lena Harper in his doorway. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed, a knowing smile on her face. "How are you feeling, Ethan? Ready for your first case?" Ethan gave a hesitant smile. "As ready as I'll ever be, I guess." Lena chuckled and walked over to his desk, placing a slim folder in front of him. "Good, because we have a client who needs our help, and it's going to be your job to make sure everything goes smoothly." Ethan opened the folder and found a detailed profile of the client, complete with photographs and a summary of the situation. "Mr. Thompson," he read aloud, "wealthy businessman, married and ... in trouble for missing his wife's charity event?" Lena nodded. "That's right. Mr. Thompson is a well-known figure in the community, and his wife Grace is very involved in various social causes. She organized a big charity gala last weekend, and Mr. Thompson promised to attend. However, instead of being there, he was out with some friends, celebrating a business deal. He completely forgot about the event." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And now his wife is suspicious?" "Very," Lena confirmed. "She's already confronted him about it, and he panicked. He told her he was stuck at work, but she's not buying it. That's where we come in." Ethan leaned back in his chair, considering the situation. "So what's the plan?" Lena smiled, clearly pleased with his enthusiasm. "We're going to create an airtight alibi for Mr. Thompson. He's already told his wife that he was at the office, so we need to reinforce that story. We'll arrange for some fake emails and phone records to show that he was in the middle of a crucial business meeting. We'll also get a few colleagues to back up his story if Grace decides to dig deeper." Ethan's stomach tightened as he listened. The plan sounded simple enough, but the implications were starting to weigh on him. "And what about the ethics of all this?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "I mean, we're helping him lie to his wife." Lena's expression softened slightly, and she sat down across from him. "I know this can be tough to swallow at first, Ethan, but you have to remember our job isn't just about lying. It's about protecting people. Sometimes the truth can do more harm than good. In this case, Mr. Thompson made a mistake. But does it really need to destroy his marriage? We're giving him a second chance to make things right." Ethan nodded slowly, though the knot in his stomach didn't loosen. He could see Lena's point, but it didn't completely ease his concerns. "Okay," he said finally. "So how do we start?" Lena stood up, her professional demeanor returning. "First, we'll need to create the fake emails. I've already drafted a few that we can send from Mr. Thompson's account. Then we'll contact a couple of his colleagues to make sure they're on board. After that, we'll plant some evidence on his phone and computer to make it all look authentic." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Ethan followed Lena's instructions carefully, helping to set up the false alibi piece by piece. They crafted a series of emails discussing a fictional business meeting, complete with fabricated details and timestamps. Lena even arranged for a few of Mr. Thompson's associates to receive these emails, ensuring that their stories would match if questioned. Once the digital trail was set, they moved on to the phone records. Lena showed Ethan how to alter call logs and text messages, making it appear as though Mr. Thompson had been in constant communication with his office during the time of the gala. It was a meticulous process, and Ethan found himself both fascinated and uneasy at the level of detail involved. Finally, Lena and Ethan met with Mr. Thompson in person to go over the plan. The businessman was a tall, imposing figure with graying hair and a nervous energy that belied his confident appearance. He listened intently as Lena explained the alibi, nodding along and asking questions when necessary. "So all I have to do is stick to the story?" Mr. Thompson asked, glancing between Lena and Ethan. "That's right," Lena replied. "Everything is in place. As long as you don't deviate from what we've set up, your wife won't have any reason to doubt you." Mr. Thompson let out a sigh of relief, visibly relaxing. "Thank you, Miss Harper, Mr. Cole. I can't tell you how much this means to me." Ethan forced a smile, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He couldn't help but notice the way Mr. Thompson's demeanor changed from anxious to relieved. It was as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders, but the realization left Ethan feeling uneasy. They were helping Mr. Thompson deceive his wife, and while it might save his marriage in the short term, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were also perpetuating a lie that could have long-lasting consequences. Later that evening, as Ethan left the office and walked home, his mind replayed the events of the day. He had successfully completed his first case, and Lena seemed pleased with his work. But as he turned the key in his apartment door, Ethan couldn't help but wonder if he was in over his head. The excitement of working at the alibi agency was real, but so were the doubts that gnawed at him. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, the quiet of his apartment enveloping him like a blanket. As he sank onto the couch, Ethan realized that he had a lot to think about. The world of alibis and excuses was far more complex than he had anticipated, and he wasn't sure how he felt about it. But one thing was certain: his new job was going to challenge him in ways he had never imagined. And this was only the beginning. Ethan Cole sat at his desk, the afternoon sun filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows across the office. The thrill of his first successful case had worn off, leaving behind a lingering sense of unease. He had spent the last few days trying to shake off the feeling, telling himself that what they did at the alibi agency was necessary, that it helped people. But the nagging doubt in the back of his mind refused to go away. He was deep in thought when Lena Harper appeared in his doorway, holding a slim folder in her hand. She had that familiar, calm expression on her face, the one that always seemed to reassure him, even when he was uncertain. "Ethan, I've got another case for you," she said, walking over to his desk and placing the folder in front of him. Ethan looked up, his curiosity piqued. "What's the situation?" Lena pulled up a chair and sat down across from him. "Her name is Sarah Bennett. She's a single mother, working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Yesterday, she missed her daughter's school play because she was at a job interview for a better position. She's feeling incredibly guilty about it and wants our help to create an alibi that will protect her daughter's feelings." Ethan opened the folder and studied the details. Sarah Bennett's face looked back at him from the photograph, a woman in her early 30s with tired eyes and a warm smile. The notes explained that she had been working as a waitress and a part-time clerk, but had recently been offered an interview for an office job that promised a much better income. The timing of the interview, however, had conflicted with her daughter's school play, a performance that her daughter Emily had been looking forward to for weeks. Ethan felt a pang of sympathy as he read through the file. He could understand why Sarah felt guilty. Missing an important event in her child's life was hard for any parent. But as he considered the request, the old doubts began to surface once again. "So she wants us to lie to her daughter?" Ethan asked, looking up at Lena. Lena nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Yes, Sarah is afraid that telling the truth will hurt Emily, make her feel like her mother doesn't care. She wants to create an excuse, something that will soften the blow." Ethan leaned back in his chair, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. But isn't lying to her daughter just as bad? I mean, what happens when Emily finds out the truth later on? Won't that hurt her even more? Lena sighed, a rare sign of her own internal conflict. "It's not an easy situation, Ethan. And you're right, there's always a risk that the truth will come out eventually. But Sarah isn't trying to deceive her daughter out of malice. She's trying to protect her, to make sure that Emily doesn't feel unloved or unimportant." Ethan frowned, still unconvinced. "But isn't it better to be honest from the start? To teach Emily that sometimes life is complicated and that people can't always be there for everything, even when they want to be?" Lena considered his words carefully before responding. "In an ideal world, yes. But Sarah is desperate. She's a single mother doing everything she can to provide a better life for her child. She missed the play because she was trying to secure a future for them. If she tells Emily the truth, it might damage their relationship at a time when they need each other the most." Ethan could see the logic in Lena's argument, but it didn't make the decision any easier. He knew that life wasn't black and white, that sometimes people did things they weren't proud of for reasons that made sense to them, But that didn't change the fact that he was being asked to help create a lie. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. So what's the plan? Lena's expression softened, seeing that Ethan was willing to move forward, even if reluctantly. We'll create a simple alibi. Sarah will tell Emily that she was called into work at the last minute because someone else didn't show up. We'll back it up with a few details, maybe a text message from her boss and a note from the school, saying she came to pick up Emily as soon as she could. Ethan nodded, though the knot in his stomach tightened. Okay, I'll work on it. Over the next few hours, Ethan crafted the alibi, making sure that everything was as believable as possible. He created a fake text message from Sarah's boss, asking her to come in on short notice, and arranged for the school to leave a message confirming that Sarah had picked up Emily right after her shift. It was all meticulously planned, designed to protect both Sarah and her daughter from the fallout of the missed play. When he was done, Ethan sat back in his chair, staring at the completed alibi on his computer screen. It was perfect, but instead of feeling satisfied, he felt hollow. The more he thought about it, the more he questioned whether they were really helping Sarah or just delaying the inevitable. The next day, Sarah Bennett arrived at the agency to review the alibi. She was exactly as Ethan had imagined, kind, soft-spoken, and clearly exhausted from juggling her responsibilities. As Lena went over the details with her, Ethan watched the relief wash over Sarah's face, the guilt she had been carrying starting to lift. "Thank you," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "This means so much to me. I just want Emily to be happy, to know that I care about her." Lena smiled reassuringly. "We understand, Sarah, and we're happy to help. Just remember, the most important thing is that you're doing your best for her." Ethan forced a smile, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't help but wonder if they were doing the right thing, if creating these lies was really the best way to protect people's feelings. As Sarah left the office, clutching the alibi that would spare her daughter's disappointment, Ethan felt a deep sense of unease. Later, as he and Lena were wrapping up for the day, Ethan finally voiced the thoughts that had been gnawing at him. "Lena, do you ever wonder if we're doing more harm than good? I mean, I get that we're helping people, but at what cost? Aren't we just creating bigger problems down the line?" Lena paused, looking at him with a mixture of sympathy and understanding. "Ethan, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've asked myself those same questions more times than I can count. The truth is, there's no easy answer. We operate in the gray areas of life, where right and wrong aren't always clear-cut." She sighed, leaning against the desk. "Yes, there's always a risk that the truth will come out, and when it does, it can be painful. But sometimes, in the moment, a lie can be a kindness, a way to protect someone from unnecessary hurt. It's not about avoiding the truth forever, but about choosing the right time and place to reveal it." Ethan nodded slowly, though the doubt in his mind still lingered. He respected Lena and understood her perspective, but he wasn't sure if he could fully embrace it. As he left the office that evening, the moral dilemma weighed heavily on his mind. He knew he had chosen a path that was far from ordinary, and with it came challenges he had never anticipated. But he also knew that he had to find his own way through the murky waters of ethics and deception, even if it meant questioning everything he was doing. The alibi agency was a place of secrets and shadows, and Ethan was beginning to realize that the hardest part of his job might not be the lies he told, but the truths he had to confront within himself. The crisp autumn air had started to settle over the city, but inside the alibi agency, the atmosphere was anything but calm. Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the computer screen without really seeing it. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of activity, each case blurring into the next. Yet something about today felt different. There was an unspoken tension in the air, a sense that something big was about to happen. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Lena's heels clicking across the polished floor. She walked briskly into his office, holding a thick folder that looked heavier than usual. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a spark of excitement in her eyes. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady but charged with anticipation, "we've got a new client, a very important one." Ethan sat up straighter, curiosity piqued. "Who is it?" Lena handed him the folder and sat down in the chair across from him, her eyes never leaving his face. "Robert King, the senator." Ethan's stomach did a somersault. Robert King was a name everyone in the city knew. He was a high-profile politician, well-respected and well-connected, with a reputation for being squeaky clean, at least publicly. But if he was coming to the alibi agency, it could only mean one thing. He had a secret, and it was big enough to jeopardize his entire career. Ethan flipped open the folder and skimmed through the details. King was embroiled in a scandal that could destroy not only his political career, but also his personal life. An affair with a staff member had been exposed, and the media was circling like sharks, ready to pounce at any sign of weakness. King needed a cover story, and fast. This is serious, Ethan said, looking up at Lena. If we mess this up, it could be a disaster. We're not talking about a missed family event or a white lie here. This is the kind of thing that could ruin lives. Lena leaned forward, her expression calm but intense. I know, Ethan, but this is exactly the kind of case that could elevate the agency. If we handle this correctly, we'll be known as the go-to place for high-profile clients who need discretion. This is an opportunity. Ethan's mind raced. He could see why Lena was excited. This was their chance to step into a new league, to work with powerful clients who could pay them handsomely for their services. But the stakes were higher than anything they had faced before, and Ethan wasn't sure if he was ready to play this kind of game. "What's the plan?" he asked, his voice a little more hesitant than usual. Lena smiled, sensing his apprehension but brushing it aside. "We're going to create a narrative that puts King in a more favorable light. He's already denied the affair, so we'll build on that. We'll suggest that the staff member in question is part of a smear campaign orchestrated by his political rivals. We'll create fake emails, set up a series of phone calls, and even plant a few leaked documents that suggest he was the target of a coordinated attack." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "So, we're framing someone else to protect him?" Lena's eyes flickered with something unreadable, but her voice remained steady. "We're protecting our client, Ethan. That's what we do." Ethan stared at the folder in front of him, his mind a swirl of conflicting emotions. He knew this was a chance to prove himself, to show that he could handle the big cases. But at the same time, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing a line that, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. "This is dangerous, Lena," he said, his voice low. "If we get caught, if any of this comes to light, it's not just King's career on the line, it's ours too. And more than that, it's wrong. We're not just helping someone save face, we're actively deceiving the public. We're destroying someone else's reputation to protect his." Lena leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied him. "Ethan, I understand your concerns, but think about it. Politicians like King operate in a world where perception is everything. A single scandal can bring down an entire career regardless of the truth. We're providing a service that people like him need. If we don't do it, someone else will." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to argue, to tell her that there had to be a better way, that they didn't have to stoop to this level. But the truth was, Lena wasn't wrong. The world of politics was brutal, and sometimes the lines between right and wrong blurred into shades of gray. "I get that," Ethan said, choosing his words carefully. "But where do we draw the line? At what point do we stop justifying what we're doing because it's necessary? This isn't just about protecting someone's feelings or helping them avoid a little embarrassment. This is a full-blown cover-up." Lena's expression softened, and for a moment Ethan saw a glimpse of the mentor he had come to respect. "Ethan, I know this is hard. Believe me, I've asked myself the same questions over the years. But the reality is, we operate in a world where the truth is often irrelevant. What matters is the story people believe. We're not hurting anyone directly. We're just controlling the narrative." Ethan wanted to push back, to argue that they were hurting someone, the staff member whose career and life would be destroyed by the fake smear campaign. But he knew Lena wouldn't see it that way. To her, this was just another case, another puzzle to solve. For the next few days, Ethan and Lena worked tirelessly to craft the perfect cover story for Robert King. They created a web of false evidence, fabricated emails and phone records, and even coordinated with a few trusted media contacts to leak the smear campaign story at just the right time. It was meticulous, calculated work, and Ethan couldn't deny that part of him was fascinated by the complexity of it all. But as the plan came together, the moral weight of what they were doing pressed down on Ethan like a heavy fog. Every time he looked at the false emails or rehearsed the talking points with King, he felt a little piece of himself slipping away. He wasn't just lying to protect someone anymore. He was becoming complicit in a larger game of deception. The night before the final phase of their plan was set to go live, Ethan sat alone in the office, staring at his computer screen. He could see the path ahead of him clearly. If they pulled this off, the alibi agency would become a powerhouse in their field. But at what cost? Was this the kind of career he wanted, where the truth was just another tool to be manipulated? As he sat there, wrestling with his conscience, Lena walked into the room. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there watching him, as if sensing the turmoil inside him. "You don't have to do this, you know," Lena said quietly. "If this case is too much for you, I'll handle it. I won't hold it against you." Ethan looked up at her, surprised by the offer. He had expected her to push him to see it through, to insist that he toughen up, but her words gave him a moment of clarity. "I'm not sure I can keep doing this, Lena," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I'm cut out for this world." Lena nodded, her expression unreadable. "It's not for everyone, Ethan. But remember, in this business, sometimes doing the right thing means playing the wrong hand." As she left him alone in the office, Ethan realized he had a choice to make. The path ahead was clear, but whether or not he wanted to walk, it was up to him. And the weight of that decision felt heavier than anything he had ever carried before. The sun was setting outside the alibi agency, casting long shadows across the office floor. Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the finalized plans for Robert King's case on his computer screen. The pieces had all fallen into place, and by tomorrow the cover story would be out in the open, ready to protect the senator from the scandal that threatened to end his career. But instead of feeling a sense of accomplishment, Ethan felt a gnawing emptiness in his chest. The moral dilemma that had been simmering in his mind since the start of this case had now reached a boiling point. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were doing something fundamentally wrong, and that the consequences of their actions would extend far beyond Robert King's political career. As he mulled over his thoughts, Ethan's phone rang, breaking the silence. He glanced at the caller ID and felt a jolt of surprise. Grace Thompson. It had been weeks since they had helped her husband, Mr. Thompson, with his alibi. He hesitated for a moment before picking up the call. "Hello, this is Ethan," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Mr. Cole, it's Grace Thompson," the voice on the other end said, trembling slightly. I don't know who else to talk to." Ethan's heart sank. There was a pain in Grace's voice that he recognized immediately, and he knew this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. "What's wrong, Mrs. Thompson?" Grace took a deep breath, as if steeling herself to say the words. "I found out about my husband. The truth. He wasn't at work that night, was he? He was out with his friends, and everything he told me was a lie." Ethan felt a cold chill run down his spine. He had always known that their work had the potential to backfire, but hearing it firsthand was something entirely different. "Grace, I'm so sorry," he began, but she cut him off. "No, don't apologize," Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't understand. Why would you help him lie to me? Why would you let him do this to our family?" Ethan's throat tightened and he struggled to find the right words. "Mrs. Thompson, we thought we were helping. Your husband didn't want to hurt you. He made a mistake, and he thought that by hiding it, he could protect you." "Protect me?" Grace's voice cracked. "All he's done is destroy the trust between us. I don't even know who he is anymore. And you're part of that, Mr. Cole. You're part of the lie." Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words press down on him like a leaden blanket. This was exactly what he had feared, being confronted with the damage their work could cause. The realization hit him with full force. They weren't just helping people. They were enabling deceit, and in the process, they were tearing lives apart. "I never wanted this to happen," Ethan said quietly, his voice filled with regret. "I'm truly sorry, Grace." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment Ethan wondered if she had hung up. But then Grace spoke again, her tone softer, more resigned. "I know you were just doing your job, Mr. Cole, but I had to tell you. There's no excuse for what he did, and no excuse for what you do either." The call ended with a soft click, leaving Ethan staring at his phone, the silence in the room suddenly deafening. The conversation with Grace echoed in his mind, her words carving deep into his conscience. For the first time since he had joined the alibi agency, he truly understood the consequences of their actions, not just in theory, but in real, painful reality. The following morning, Ethan walked into Lena's office, the same office where he had first been hired, and where so many decisions had been made. Lena was at her desk reviewing the final details for Robert King's case. She looked up as he entered, her eyes sharp and focused. "Ethan, everything's set for King's cover story," she said, gesturing to the file on her desk. "I want you to double-check the timeline before we send it out." Ethan didn't sit down. Instead, he stood in the doorway, his hands clenched at his sides. "Lena, we need to talk." Lena raised an eyebrow, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What's on your mind?" He took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to say would change everything. "I had a call from Grace Thompson last night. She found out the truth about her husband, and she's devastated. It made me realize something. What we're doing here, it's not just about helping people. We're causing real harm, Lena. We're breaking trust, ruining relationships. I'm not sure I can keep doing this." Lena's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or maybe disappointment. "Ethan, I know this job isn't easy. It requires a certain perspective, a willingness to see the bigger picture." "But what if the bigger picture is wrong?" Ethan countered, his voice rising slightly. "What if we're just justifying things to ourselves so we can sleep at night? Grace Thompson is a real person with real feelings, and we helped destroy her trust in her husband. And now we're about to do the same thing on a much larger scale with Robert King. I can't keep pretending that this is okay." Lena sighed and leaned back in her chair, folding her hands in front of her. "Ethan, I've been in this business long enough to know that the truth isn't always black and white. Sometimes what we do is necessary to protect people from a greater harm. The world isn't perfect, and people make mistakes. We give them a second chance, a way to move forward." "But at what cost?" Ethan pressed. "Are we really helping people, or are we just making it easier for them to lie, to avoid responsibility? I can't do this anymore, Lena. I can't keep being a part of something that feels so wrong." For a long moment, Lena was silent. Then she stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city beyond. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, almost reflective. "I respect your decision, Ethan. I've always known this line of work isn't for everyone. And you're right, there are costs. There always are. But you have to decide for yourself what you're willing to accept." Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him, mixed with a deep sadness. He had learned a lot at the alibi agency, and he respected Lena more than he could express. But he knew that he couldn't stay, not if he wanted to stay true to himself. "Thank you, Lena," he said softly, "for everything." Lena turned back to him, a faint smile on her lips. "You've got a good heart, Ethan. Don't lose that. It's rare in this world." He nodded, and with one last look around the office that had been his world for the past few months, he turned and walked out. As he stepped out into the crisp autumn air, he felt a sense of clarity that he hadn't felt in a long time. The path ahead of him was uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure. He was leaving behind the shadows of deception and walking towards something truer, something that aligned with who he wanted to be. Ethan Cole had entered the alibi agency with a sense of excitement and a desire for something different. He was leaving with a deeper understanding of himself and a determination to find a path that allowed him to live by his values, no matter how difficult that path might be.